Nancy, thank you so much for helping us with getting the room over here. Much appreciated. I think it would be remiss if we didn't mention that we're coming up on a year now, almost, is that correct? That Nancy has been missing. So as you all know, again, as mentioned earlier, there was the impetus behind this whole task force. And, again, we still have hope, of course. And again, hopefully whatever we put together here in terms of this task force will go toward helping others, such as the Peters family, and the county responding to these types of issues. So I just want to mention that. Yeah, so we're coming up down to the finish line here. We are getting really close. Again, we thank you so much for your commitment and support for this task force. It's been a very big educational experience for myself. I know that for sure. And just being able to meet with all of you and learn the differences and all the different programs that we provide in this area. So again, it's been a great experience, and I'm hoping, I'm confident actually, that what we put together here is going to really help the population that we're trying to serve. Just a real quick reminder that this meeting is subject to the Brown Act, so it is open to public comment. We'll have a few minutes at the end of the meeting for the public to comment on any concerns that they may have with regard to this task force. So with that, I know we're started late, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started with the main points of the agenda.
So today, I hope it won't be too much of a talking head. I really would love to have some discussion. Let's see, I'm going to get my other glasses out. I want to sort of share with you conceptually how we're seeing the work here, because I'm finding that after our work group, we've had the 4 work groups, and a lot of good findings have come out of this idea that, what strategies can we do to improve coordination? What strategies do we have regarding technology? We've looked at training ideas and what's happening already in community outreach. So we've really kind of hit these areas pretty hard. We had our last meeting to make sure that everybody had a chance to speak into each of the 4 groups. And so the staff and I have been able to kind of look over that, and we began to sort of think about the template for this report. We sort of stepped back from that just a little bit because I wanted to be sure that we're all on the same page regarding sort of how we see this issue that we've been asked to think about. I find it's a little complex in that we can think about a whole progression. And so if you look at this color copy here, I've sort of designed very simple. We can maybe get some skill set to this, but I really looked for a way to help us look at what do we mean by the population that we're looking at, what are we trying to address. And so law enforcement has really helped educate me quite a bit about the idea of missing persons and how those that are at risk, which there's criteria for that in the Department of Justice through the state, they rise to this critical missing person. So here's sort of my thinking about the work that we've been talking about in sort of 3 areas. And so you see protecting as sort of the long arrow here, that in our work we have not just been talking about, boom, somebody's missing, we've got to be responsive. It's really thinking about, let's prevent a lot of that from happening. That will save everybody's resources and sorrow and all of that. So we want to see if there's ways that we can work to prevent. And a lot of good ideas have come out of each of the work groups about that. So there's the protecting our loved ones. Then there's the locating. So, something happens and then you move, into action for locating the person. So again, drawing from the 4 work groups on that. And then the idea that there are some people that have been found, but they're not able to identify themselves and people don't know who they are. So thinking about sort of this 3rd area that does fit very closely with locating. I think law enforcement has said, they kind of go all together. But so if we can do some prevention, and then if we can be coordinated in our response and have ways of identifying folks. in members here that I've been talking to, I think we've all been picking up little nuances, little pieces that we know a lot, and then we bring something from someone else, and it's like, wow, okay. So the idea is to try to capture the big picture, and then be able to kind of move that out so that citizens understand that, providers understand that. And coming from the county, kind of that we support and kind of wrap our arms around that. So is that resonating for people? Are you feeling like, is there any pieces I've missed maybe in my thinking? Pretty simple. But when I thought about ideas that have been shared, I get caught between the prevention mode and the response mode, I think is where I kind of have trouble. So this is why I kind of started to talk to staff about this, and we thought it seemed to fit. Is that okay? Anybody having thoughts or input on that? Yes?
So I think this is excellent overview on one page. And I think that what one of the recommendations that the committee might want to make is somebody to lead the effort, right? So maybe an organization, aging adults might be a candidate, but that wouldn't necessarily keep the autism part of it in. Maybe the fire department, EMS, but they don't really have the broad outreach for the prevention stuff. The sheriff's department for responsibility, again, they don't have the prevention stuff. So I don't know who it is in the county or which group in the county, but if one of the groups in the county could say, okay, well, we'll be the overseer of it. You know, not all responsibility goes there. Obviously, you know, other agencies have to step up, but they're the ones that would, some agency would take this mantle. You'd probably get some support from the Board of Supervisors to oversee it. So I guess I think that's a key element that is probably sort of missing in our discussions at this point.
Yeah. On the second page, you know, I've drafted, this is not final and there's a draft across it, but something that we might propose, some kind of a policy statement. So I'm skipping around a little bit, but anyway, I think that, you know, the second paragraph is right in sync with what you're saying. That perhaps, and again, I have to see if everybody's on board here, but the task force would recommend that the County Board of Supervisors create what I was calling the LA County Consortium on Wandering and Missing Incidents. So having some kind of a group that would have a lead agency to guide quality and expertise to all stakeholders in their effort to protect, locate, and identify critical missing persons. So that's kind of encaptures exactly what you're saying. So I think we're on a similar page. Yes?
In addition to that, and I completely agree, in addition to that, we do have these very solid individual pieces that by themselves in a silo are great, except that there's no cohesion. And so when we had especially the first responders talk about timing of events when a person goes missing, their investigation time and their time that they have to report all varied, and the communication of each of their entities to other first responder entities varied also up to a week. And so within this consortium, there needs to be, I don't have a better word than an ombudsman, someone almost like a 911 operator who would be the cohesive force to communicate with all of these bodies that we have identified as crucial in locating this person. So if someone goes missing, if an autistic child goes missing in Glendale, Glendale begins their investigation, but they also need to call this body within the consortium, and this body then shares this information, as much information as they have on this person, to the sheriff, to all of the surrounding areas, and any other bodies we have identified. I think we mentioned the hospitals, and because that's what's missing, is that independently all of our agencies are wonderful, but they don't have the capacity to share this information very quickly on a broad scale. And that's what we're missing, because we are such a large area, and we have acknowledged over and over that a person can get on a bus and get from here to San Bernardino, who is nonverbal, and then we are really in trouble. And so I can't emphasize enough that the time I've spent on this for 2 years, that's the piece that I feel like is glaring at us, that we just need this, and it doesn't need to be a very large force. We can start with, a small number of people based on some data we've collected, maybe 3 people, 3 operators would suffice, and as volume of calls increase, then we would then adjust. But I think for bringing all of these agencies together, we really need, in a very quick response, we need an individual body to communicate this.
Yes.
Two thoughts. One is, could those people be part of the 211 system, so that they were specialists with a supervisor at a higher level within the 211 system to do this coordination? Because it just strikes me that information and referral gets done that way.
I don't know where it would be, but it wouldn't be a parent calling that number.
Right.
I call Glendale PD, they start. Glendale PD calls this number, whether it's 201 or whatever we identify, and then they are responsible then to reach out to CHP, to LAPD, to sheriff, to local hospitals, whatever. That the supervisors can identify.
So I think
Okay, and the
Deborah's
second
pointing out
half-
there's already an infrastructure in place that has a centralized thing that might be an excellent starting.
I'm just trying to find something that already exists that we could enhance to make what you're saying possible, because what you're saying is important. I think you're right. The other thing I would note that seems kind of glaring to me is that when it says in the second paragraph, these agencies include but are not limited to, well, this was convened in part by our local area agencies on aging, whether we call them WEDOC or whatever, or the LA City Department of Aging. But it seems to me that the area agencies on aging, at least for the older population, are supposed to be our central coordinating entities. And so I'd love to call them out as being on this. They're important.
So I had just kind of put the kind of categories thinking of social service organization, but we do from our task force have all the organizations that were named by the board that we could include here. So
Otherwise, it sounds to me like that's like a community-based social service organization rather than a quasi-governmental entity like a AAA.
And yeah, so I kind of hesitated that I would leave somebody out or, but I think that we as a committee need to be sure that we have all the names of the organizations that should be a part of this. I kind of saw this as maybe like a one-year experience where the issue is studied, like piloting ideas, shoring up some of these plans that we have, things, kind of getting things implemented that we've been working on, to see if what, is it that we need a whole service line, like you're kind of describing. I know that there's a missing person website, right? Things aren't like within 2 hours, somebody has to be put onto the website. There's some speedy kinds of things that I could see somebody that's a lead agency starting to monitor and be a part, being helpful in sharing. But I don't know if I would want them to, certainly not take like a lead in the investigation or something like that, right?
No, it has nothing to do with
Kind of align
investigation.
with
It's just pure communication.
Mm-hmm.
It's
dissemination.
Glenn, if it originated in Glendale, Glendale is leading the investigation. It's simply the information that I have given to Glendale. My child looks like this, he does this, this is when he went missing, this is what he's wearing. It's as simple as just the logistics, sharing the logistics so that that can be shared multi-agency.
Yeah.
No talk about interfering in investigation.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Lucretia.
Yeah, Viviana, my comment was about, this is a great idea, what you're talking about is the part of all this operation, is the coordination of activities. So I was hoping that if you are putting this consortium as a recommendation forward, that we identify what is the role and the responsibilities and what kind of activities are going to happen at that level. I think among those activities is drafting both a program or something infrastructure, and then the next step to that is what is the protocol that will be used countywide. So everybody knows what are the steps that you need to take, and who is leading the effort will be one of the key things.
Excellent, yeah.
So, it strikes me that when we do this, we may get pushback about resources. I mean, 211, the AAAs, everyone is occupied to capacity. And there clearly are foundations in our area that would be very interested in funding a couple of years of this, and I'm thinking California Community Foundation or California Endowment, it could be the Archstone Foundation, but there are foundations locally, and I think that it might need extra resources if the supervisors don't have it themselves, which they might, but it might need having someone to bring in some resources for a 3-year period to do a good demonstration and with a good evaluation and a plan to make it even better.
Because I think the evaluation could be missing, right? So people could be doing, heart and soul, putting everything into it, but we don't know if it's really enhancing the response. Let me walk you back a little bit. Within each of these areas, I have picked out ideas that you have shared. Some I've heard more one-to-one from folks, and so I wanted you to know that the content in here has been carried over to be part of what we formulate as recommendations. So for example, our strategy of better coordination, and so for this I've just kind of kept it short and sweet so we can track it. But we would say, there needs to be better coordination in these efforts. And how that would play out is then we would take, so under protecting, there's a couple of bullets here. And then we move across to locating, there's some bullets here. And so we would follow through with strategy A of enhancing coordination. And actually the staff have done some work on this to kind of flesh it out, start to flesh it out. So it's taking on some life. But I felt like these were some of the issues that I feel have come through that I've heard that should be part of a plan that a consortium could be looking at. So I wanted to can I run through those? What do you think? Okay. So when I look at this, so I'm looking at the conceptual plan, and then just know that these would follow a template here where they would be described and including sort of the recommendations. What is this and what would we like to see done with it? And then is there any budget to connect to this? Is it budget neutral, or is there some resources we'd like the county to consider? So that's sort of how we see this report coming together, sort of taking on some of these ideas. The idea of long-term supports and services was kind of piggybacking on something that Dr. Cherry said. I think it's the idea of spelling out what exists already, and we've got a lot of programming already in place through the Area Agency on Aging and the Ombudsman, APS, some of the different services that we can talk about, that these are already there, they're already in place, but they would need to be brought into the picture here to understand sort of how this process is being, coordinated and being more efficient. So I could see maybe some training for those folks as well. The next is, this is kind of a more, I don't know how we'll go with this, but there is a brochure that has been put out by a vendor that works closely with Project Lifesaver. And Kirk, you have some samples of this. There's this vendor will create a handout basically that AAAs have been using in other states. And I know that, yeah, Rich has it here. We'll send this around. What this has in it is just some basic information about wandering, and then it encourages family members to write down information, put a photo, put a fingernail, put a fingerprint into this booklet. I think of it almost like doing an advance directive. And I don't know, my gut says I don't know how helpful this would be. But I think it's very educational to be thinking about the idea that a missing incident may come into play. Did you have some comments about it? I know you talked to
yes.
folks.
The thing about that is, again, it has been proven to work in other states, specifically the AAAs. The thing is it's very customizable. So anything that LA County wants included in that document, we can do. So we're very flexible, but it's definitely, I think it's something that we need to explore. And, and my understanding is they're very flexible with the cost and all of that. But again, we don't need to necessarily go with this vendor, but the idea that, having this information for family members, for, agencies that are involved in this type of thing, I think it's really critical that we explore this, and it's something that we can get together really quickly. It's already out, it's already done, it's already out there, so.
So like partners that are here, that do services, could be on the back page of this, as resources, other sources that we think could be helpful.
Sorry, so you fill this out and then you submit it to who?
We keep it.
You keep it.
It's-
So in time of crisis, you're supposed to find us and be like, here?
Well, I think the idea is that it's just one piece of the puzzle.
But
Once
if we could fill this and give it to our local police, that makes it a lot easier, and they could put it in their dispatch database.
Well, the thing is, I think, one of the pieces that we hope to accomplish is to create that central database, right? And so all that information, once we do create that, it would be part of this document, this pamphlet.
So
So
there's
one of the
been,
things they recommended then, by the way, is that for each one of those pages, you take a picture of it with your cell phone, so that it's with you, when if an incident happens, so you have all the information right there.
it's kind of sensitizing caregivers, to, all these things that, I should have a photo on
Right.
hand, and things that perhaps we're not thinking of. Aren't we consensus? Oh,
Maybe just to add on still this, what I consider as outreach kit, it can be customized. Part of the information could go to the coordinating agency, the leading agency, and that would form the database system from which missing people would be identified, or all these key agencies will be able to utilize client information. But the idea is also to develop it as an outreach toolkit, so that one of the strategy would be outreach and training. This will be distributed to the community. And from this, they get the information, contact the information of agencies, and the information they have to provide, we will include the information and collect the client information to be uploaded in a centralized database system. So we'll discuss about the technology side in a bit. That's what I wanted to add on this.
Yeah, what the outreach work group determined is that there's a lot of information out there, right? Different agencies, different entities are providing info to the public. But, this would be one spot, one pamphlet that everyone could, refer to that would have all that information, or at least the majority of that critical information included in it.
We'll just focus on this idea of at-risk missing persons. So I just wanted you to see it. This is an idea that we have, and I wondered if there was strong feelings, pro or against.
I was just going to ask, as part of this report you're providing, are you guys going to come up with, going to estimate a budget, or like what is it that you need to start up, and almost a sustainability plan on what is it that you're going to need to actually sustain?
We have discussed that. And so, for example, we really haven't discussed, what the recommendation would be. So today's really the first day that I'm saying, what do you think about an ongoing committee, some kind of an ongoing coalition? And that helps us do the planning for the budgeting. So each of the items that we end up transferring on to our recommendations would indicate an estimate for some money. And that's been helpful. We have a couple of proposals pending. Moving into technology, we can tell you more about that as well, so that we can get a better handle on some of the costs. So when I look at sort of the agenda today and what I wanted to be sure to cover, you can see some of the other highlighted areas here that are part of coordination. We've heard really strongly that if there's any way to have a photo around, or any way to have fingerprinting, that these would really enhance the response. And so I think wherever we can kind of get that in, at this point we did hear Detective Soto with LAPD couldn't be here today, but he was able to talk to contacts at the state level for us. And so they are looking at the database that's at the state level for missing persons. And so who knows how long that will take, and we can't do anything or influence that per se, but I wanted this committee to know that we've heard that there's work on that data system. Because I know we've had a lot of concern that jurisdiction-wise, people can get out of our county so easily that really it needs to be an effort at a higher level, national. But certainly the state is looking at how to do a better job to have a database that can hold some of those things. So I think just getting us more educated here about the idea of photos and fingerprints. So those are included.
Maybe
yes.
just on the technology side, particularly with the database, we have started also working, consulting IT managers. So we're developing some options, and one of the option would be to develop kind of centralized database system or open source database system whereby all of these key players, agencies, in the database systems that exist in the different agencies will be able to integrate with the centralized database system. This database system may also be working with the device systems. So I think for the next meeting we may have more developed idea, and that will be presented.
That just happened this morning, so that's hot off the press.
Right.
So with technology, I want to move to that. There's been some leads in that area that we want to kind of go forward with, and so I want to get your feelings on that. Oh, I'm sorry, Diane.
Oh, that's good. I just have maybe a two-part question, and it's to the sheriffs in the room and the fire department in the room, and to what we're thinking about. When we have the lead agency, or even when we go further than that, when we have the various departments that are looking for the person that is wandering, are we going to try and establish some way that there's a designated, perhaps, amount of time that is designated to footwork, I want to say, as opposed to just having their picture in the squad car? Are we going to try to get people that are going to be going to stores or to see if they've actually seen the person? How are we going to actually be looking for the person?
Well, I mean, it's really a science, and it's already developed, I think, in the sense of all these entities around the county do this work every day. They're doing it now. What we wanted to do, though, is capture, all the possible things that can be done. And so we'll be talking about some checklists that we've been able to develop, and I think that addresses your question.
Okay.
There's a lot of guidance now, mandates that come through the California Department of Justice that really set these time clocks, like within 2 hours people have to be in the missing person database if they're at risk. So there's guidelines, but then I think we need sort of this lead agency to really get out and talk to different entities that are having trouble meeting the guidelines. Because even the checklist, it is required by law to have a checklist at each law enforcement place. But there's 46 entities, and in our law enforcement survey we had 10 respondents, which was, I hear, a pretty good response actually. But we wonder, there's probably small groups out there that find this a bit, when do I have time to make a checklist kind of a thing. So there is a checklist that comes through California Department of Justice that kind of gets this rolling. But it's very basic, I've been told, by people that do the work. So we did have a subcommittee meeting of LAPD and LA Sheriff, and so that's included in your packet today. It's some great work. I think we're really moving that ball forward. I mean, I feel like, there's a lot of things that have been fairly doable that with this, your task force efforts, I think we can sort of move the ball, or kind of move things a little forward. But I do feel like this is just we're just kind of trying to get things started, and who's going to hold this ball and evaluate, is this enough? Do we need to have, more attention to come alongside? Did you have a second question?
No, I was just wondering, what can anyone tell me, what are some of the steps that we do now?
It's in your handout.
When we're looking.
Yeah.
I see the checklist, but is this what's already being done?
By some. So this is an integration of, yeah, here they are. So we're kind of skipping around a little bit, but let's do it. Let's go to checklist. So this would be first responder checklist, and these are the two handouts. And I'm not going to spend a lot of detailed time on this, but perhaps those of you in law enforcement, if you want to take a look at this to see if it's making sense to you. John Gannon, Lieutenant Gannon from LA Sheriff Department, has been really active on this committee. He hasn't been able to be at these meetings, but I wanted you to know that he's been very much in touch with us. And he was able to take 3 different checklists and put them together, kind of overlay them. So, so I'm very hopeful that we've been able to capture a lot of the different issues. There's still work to be done on this. For example, we've talked about sort of the phasing out by time that Diana mentioned, sort of what needs to happen in the first couple of hours, So when you become, realizing all the different possibilities, it's probably overwhelming. There's just a lot there. But the hope was to make a more efficient, somebody can, if you're in your squad car, you can begin to review that. You've got something right away that you can tap into as far as the checklist. So I'm really grateful, actually, to the work of our subcommittee, and Solomon and Rich are a part of that as well.
Is this one pager? Is this what LASD actively uses now?
Yeah.
Or the stakeholders of the operation and everything?
They had a fairly developed checklist, but they were able to add some new items. Like I said, they took highway patrol as well. But we had the checklist from the highway patrol as well as LAPD. Yeah. So it's the 3 big entities, and I understand there's some strong checklists, perhaps like the Claremont Police Department has. So the hope would be that we continue, especially if you had an ongoing group, where you would begin to pull in, these other parties with some time and more, getting them a sense of what we're doing, so that they could begin to see how they could contribute to the checklist. Anything more on the checklist? Okay. All right. So we've got this work started. So I feel like it's a lot of information, but I did want to, there's been some sort of helpful things that have happened to take us forward, I believe. One is when we talk about technology, very early on we heard about Project Lifesaver as a program that is actually in 3 cities, I believe, in LA County, but not operating in, I think, Monrovia. San Marino, I think, has it, and Glendale has probably the most active, right? But they have a small number of people on that program. It was interesting because it was LA Sheriff, looking over at Naomi, that really kind of said this is probably not the ideal solution. But then as we got all the IT people together, we realized that this is a pretty easy thing that can be done. And what the plan would be that we would propose, if you're agreeable, is to have LA Sheriff agree to buy more of the receivers. And they would agree to buy like 6 more. We need to ask for support budget. But they're fairly reasonably priced for technology. So you would have, there's sort of a plan that's been thought out to have 2 available in helicopters and 4 strategically in these vehicles, these vans they have that are around the county. And through a mutual aid contract, then this could be an enhancement to Project Lifesaver. It could actually help people that are not in one of those 3 cities. If they wanted to go ahead and sign up, they could. And then they would be able to, if there were an emergency, there would be the sheriffs that would be covering the county. So, thoughts about that? The idea would be that this is one of many possible tools.
I'm completely supportive. I think it's an easy, low-hanging fruit. The cost is very low. The efficiency is very high. Sergeant Tracy Fox has given us the data over and over. The amount of time that it takes to find someone who is a critical risk is so small compared to without the device, without Project Lifesaver. So the cost-effective, the risk to life. It's just, I don't see how we could go wrong with starting with that and then enhancing with other things. But at least it's something that we can offer. I'm totally supportive.
I had talked to one of our caregivers, Mrs. Carr, had been at our meetings early on. She uses that system, but then she also uses an application, a GPS called Gizmo. So it's interesting, even within, families, they may want to use a couple of different devices.
Is it somewhere on the checklist to ask a question that is pertinent to that? Are they a part of some kind of program, and where would that fit into the order of questioning? Because I feel like that would have a
On the bottom
solution.
of page 2,
Thank you, Kurt.
the very last sentence.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Great point.
Because I feel like that is a problem, is that people don't even know that, what is that bracelet? You need to ask and look at it. So it's there. So, I could see this kind of a tool being something to train to even. I could see someone saying, what the heck is Project Lifesaver? I'm supposed to tap into this, what is it? To get people trained up to realize that there may be, this may be something to consider. You may be looking for someone that has this device.
And obviously, it would need to be expanded for whatever the various third-party vendors are that they offer, not just specific to Project Lifesaver or Medical Alert, but the phrasing of the question has to be something vague enough to say, are they a part of,
Yeah.
I don't know how to phrase it exactly, but not to limit it to 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 companies, because there might be a dozen.
And I think it's tracking with any tracking devices, right?
Let me just to add 2 points. I remember from the technology group discussion, the suggestion was to come up with a name of tracking devices. And obviously Project Lifesaver is going to be one of the important devices or technologies. So the idea is also to include others that may have to be provided through contracted service providers, with an agency being on the lead, facilitating, communicating, organizing, and providing all the information.
Yeah, given there's, budgetary issues and all of that, I could see that taking more time, or, writing grants or things like that to be able to pilot and evaluate, seeing if that's an expense that the county would want to take on. But certainly private individuals that want to participate in these programs, we need to, be educating that there's a menu of options out there. And I think I've learned from all of you that, there's different kinds of technology. And so there's a lot of different alert systems. I just got an alert before our meeting, actually, about something going on. So there's the Nixon, the Silver Alert, and then LA County, and there's a number of them. And I just kind of keep signing up for them to see what they're like. But, so there's a lot of alert systems. Then there's database issues, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then there's technology. We've learned about the radio frequencies, such as Project Lifesaver, GPS, and all kinds of different vendors out there at different costs. And so I think the hope is to educate, again, people that haven't been, living this, that these are things to consider, and they should, here's some ways to get started. I think then a work group also could be looking at what are easy things to do that maybe we can begin to see if there's something to fund. So I'm kind of thinking that will take more time. Our report is going to go in December, so it's coming up real close here. So I think that we recommend continued work to look into the additional kinds of tracking that could be supported by the county.
Again, I think your recommendation at the beginning of this was, should we not recommend that the sheriff's department go ahead and get the receivers for Project Lifesaver, not necessarily, again, advocating for that particular company, but again, if private individuals want to buy the receiver, then that would be, the transceiver, that would be a real low-hanging fruit, exactly what you said, right? Low-hanging fruit, it's pretty easy to do, probably not a big budget item for the county, and I think there's probably, a really huge step right there.
And that's where we're going to be working on the numbers, right? We need to know what the prevalence is of this issue. So we're going to be working very closely and making sure that we have, when we put that budget request in, we need to know how much are we going to be requesting, how much is this going to really cost the county. So we'll be reaching out to the experts to kind of give us closer approximation of what the numbers look like for this population.
So we'll be talking about the prevalence, but the Project Lifesaver, we do have a proposal coming any day now about this idea of, what this would look like if the LA sheriffs were, buying this. It includes some training requirements and batteries and sort of how to maintain it over, a few years. So that's all being worked out.
What does it cost for families?
That's a good question.
For the Project Lifesaver?
It's $300 for the bracelet, and the battery is $50. Glendale will, if a family cannot afford that, Glendale will charge some nominal fee per month, something like $10 a month, really just to cover the cost of the battery. I think the battery needs to be changed every 3 months, 2 months, every 2 months. And part of the changing of the battery is the relationship building between the officers and the client. And so that's an important component
Just one
of
of
it.
the models that works really well in Glendale, that would be very challenging, sheriff county-wide.
Right,
Sure,
so to be
where
clear-
a foundation.
To be clear, I think what this committee might recommend is that we're not providing the bracelets and stuff, right? We're saying if private families want to do that, that's great, and we're not going to provide the battery replacement every 2 months, everything else, because that's a huge budget item for the county potentially, right? So what we're recommending is that the transceivers are provided to the sheriff's department, so if people do get the bracelets,
We're ready to go.
we're ready to go.
But I mean, do we want to exclude that as a possible option of, can the county?
Absolutely, but again,
Right.
as Avery points out, we're not going to get there in 2 months, right?
No.
We're not going to have a,
Right, but we
This
can
is sort of
we
concrete
can definitely
proposal.
make that recommendation in 2 months, though.
Sure,
You know what I'm
absolutely.
It's part of the work plan, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would just note that we have worked with our county supervisors just to pay for medical alert bracelets when those cost about $65, and lots of families can't afford the $65. So this, approach, which I ended up to costing $600 for year one, is going to work for middle-class families and higher, but not for the majority of families struggling with these conditions in this county.
And that's well noted. I think in the beginning of our work, we almost just put, Project Lifesaver is not the answer. But then as we began to research other tools, there's pros and cons to each. So I think the goal has been, can we make
It's
a
fine.
list?
We should go for it.
And I think that people that are on it now, this would enhance finding them if they were to go missing. But, yeah. go ahead.
So you had suggested that foundations have a role here. And I serve on the board of the Epilepsy Foundation. I know that we have lots of funds that we provide for our clients to provide different services. My son has epilepsy and has intellectual disabilities. I can see proposing to the Alzheimer Foundation, the Autism Speaks Foundation, to Epilepsy Foundation, saying we are asking you as a county to create a grant that our families can apply for, and you would then pay for this. There's opportunities. We just have to ask for it. Alzheimer's Foundation
So
won't support
I
that?
work for Alzheimer's Greater LA. There happens to be an Alzheimer's Foundation. They don't have the funds for that. We don't have the funds for that. We manage to get funds from grants that we get from the county AAAs and from the supervisor offices. And I think, if I look at the Alzheimer's Association, they also don't have the funds for this kind of thing. So all of us would be going to foundations, and foundation funding is great for a startup and an evaluation, but not for ongoing support. So I think we have to look at other places. It could be state legislation so that low-income people can get this kind of service. But I'd still say start with it with a middle-class population. That's okay. It's a beginning, and then we continue to look for resources to spread beyond. We write grants and occasionally have caregiver emergency support money, but it's not something as a small nonprofit that we just have. And I'd say the same for the other ones in Alzheimer's.
Well, Autism Speaks is well-funded, and so is Epilepsy Foundation.
That's
So-
great, and I think the regional centers can also elect to have this as something that they came in for.
Yeah.
as their regional center clients, yeah, can apply for it.
I wish that the caregiver resource centers were well-funded, because that would be a great state source of, money for this thing, but they are not.
So this is one of our kind of recommendations we feel like we can put in there, that we'll have a budget connected to it, that we can say, here's something we can begin. I think it would provide data too, to see if we can expand people using it and how successful, is that. I did want to talk a little bit more about databases. I was able to, one of our members, she hasn't been able to be here, is the LA County Fire Chief, and Eleni Pappas. She's talked to me in passing several times that she really felt like it's the electronic medical record, let me see if I want to say it right. Is that on this one? Yeah. So moving along the pages here, I have sort of updates about the tracking device proposal, then this leveraging existing database, electronic patient care record database. Has anyone heard of that? Okay.
Talk to the fire department, ask them to look at it.
Exactly. So we had a meeting with LA Sheriff and LA PD to talk about this. So I've sort of been trying to bring pieces together that Lux to Aspire, and there's been quite a bit of activity right now, so they've been really tight. But I was able to get a PowerPoint presentation from the captain on what is this. And so basically she's been explaining to me that since the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, that the fire department is mandated when they get 911 calls, everyone needs to go into this database. And she felt like what Kirk did to go see the records was brilliant, because she said we're not having a lot of detectives access for that. It's not well utilized. But she said this is so specific. It's a fairly robust new database. I think that the input is over $500,000. There's a lot of resources already here. So the idea would be to leverage this database, and we started talking about it. Do you remember at the last meeting, some folks said we need a database that's very searchable. Like if I just know their first name, or I know their gender and where they were picked up, or this or that. Those are all options that would work in this database. And so she kind of did some screenshots for me of what data is in there. So I just included a little bit for you there about the patient information they put in, and then the search capabilities that they have. But they have this quick find feature. So we started, I said, well, what if we use the database in a more proactive way? Is there a way to do that? And she said it hasn't been used that way, but it has that capability. So we started saying, what if the fire department had like a month where they were, open arms, bring your loved one in. We do a 911 report, which way they wouldn't market it that way, but they would basically go into this system and make a record, so that everybody that wanted to participate would be in this database. It's kind of, as you start to think out scenarios, it wouldn't help in every situation, but I think getting people's information in there would be a real strength. There was talk about pictures. She said it has a capacity for photos, but at this point, due to patients' rights, and you probably know more about this, you help me if I'm off. So they basically, if like you're in a traumatic accident, they might take pictures of you. So to help the doctors at the emergency department know, something went through this part of the body or whatever. They take pictures and then those go into this database, but they actually get picked out. They basically get by default they come out. So it's not really set up at this point to hold like a photo of people, but it has the capability. So it felt like another thing that would take more time, but that it's certainly something to consider leveraging, both, trying to get people proactively in the database, but also for right now, any investigator can ask for this data. So it would be very time sensitive, because the more you wait, the longer, the more records there are to look at. But you can put it in there and, it will tell you where they were picked up, where they were taken, things like that. So it was something that a lot of us didn't know about. So I wanted to share that with you.
But just to clarify, this is only for adults?
What's that?
It's only for adults?
It's for any 911.
Because it says the information will be stored for children for 7 years after the patient turns 18. So does that mean that
It's
they
kept
will?
longer. Yeah, it's kept longer for them. I think
Okay.
it's 7 years, the time clock starts for an adult right away, but if you're a child, they keep it until you're 18 and the clock starts, yeah. So it's something where the data is stored there. So this is kind of a huge, it has a lot of capabilities, what I'm kind of hearing. So I know that our IT folks are kind of looking at options. This might be something to connect into something else. It might be something just right at this point to be sure it's on the checklist, something to look for as well. So I just wanted you to know about that.
So I just was wondering, so it sounds to me like this would be particularly useful for someone who has a history or has repeated incidents of wandering away, because then more likely they're already in the database, because you have had to have an EMS call out to know when you get in there in the first place, right?
Well, it would be, for example, you're looking for somebody and you wonder if they've been picked up or they hit by a car or did something happen, you can begin to get some, check in here and see if they're in here.
Okay.
If something happened, are they coming up in a quick fund
Okay.
kind of search.
But also what you were saying, the voluntary sign out, then they would be in the system, you don't have
Yeah.
anything.
Oh, so it could be
Traumatic
voluntary as
editing.
well, okay.
So I would love to see like this body, whatever we recommend this ongoing coalition, but would continue to work on, let's have twice a year, like the time that people are encouraged to go to the fire department and do this. Now, there's about 31 entities in LA County. So I remember Mark educated me about police departments, there's 46 entities, right? 46?
City departments,
Yeah.
including LAPD.
So that's what makes us so complex, as you well know, right? But as I was talking to the captain, we kind of thought if you had sort of a directory for jurisdiction where you could start, for certain parts of the county, so just making it more efficient and making it something that comes up on a checklist that people consider looking at could be very helpful.
Have we talked about at all organizations that have databases where seniors, for instance, are already registered, that there can be a component that when they give them the information, that if something happens to them, they can release the information? And example being is the county senior centers, they now have a system that's similar to the ATM machine. When you go in, you have to register and say that you've been there. And they've already collected all of your information. So if you come up missing, you could just go and see if they're there, and they could pass that information on to the agency that would be in charge of this. But with asking them, if something happens to them, can you give out their information because of the HIPAA law? But I mean, there's
That's
lots
a
of
big issue as well.
agencies that
Yeah.
we could just connect on to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and what we're trying to explore is we understand there are pieces of databases within different agencies. APS, for example, we have our own databases. The purpose may be different, the structure may be different, target population may be different. AMS is one of them. Fire departments have their own databases. Law enforcement agencies have their own databases. Health agencies have their own databases. So now what we're trying to explore is to set up a system that will interface with all this, have with the information, the basic client information is what we need, as you say. Some of the specific confidential information may not be needed. But if information can be relayed through an integrated system from all these pieces of databases into a bigger one, centralized kind of database, that
would be
may
a
be more
time-
effective.
We need a lot of time for that, right? I don't know about you. I kind of go, oh, I think it's a big project, right? But
Could
maybe
be a
we're at a
big
place
project.
now where,
We're trying to consult with IT managers to see if this would be a possibility. But if you have, ideas, suggestions, I think that's something we need to.
I have a question. Is there a possibility where you have an exchange sort of database where you require the agency or these databases every time they encounter somebody who's wanted to report in? So sort of like you have a built-in triage for, you know, otherwise it's gonna be very expensive to try to link everything up.
Yes.
But you can make a phone call. I mean, you know.
Yeah, but you'd be like, it would have to be a reporting requirement, right? Like if I'm in clinic, I saw somebody, I would have to report.
Report.
Saying that I have a person that's probably, you know, an incident of wondering, and so probably needs to be followed. You know,
So-
track.
Do you work with ReadyNet at all? A ReadyNet database? Okay. So there are a number of databases out there, and so I think this would be more of an ongoing discussion. What I heard at last meeting, I think out of exasperation, one member of our task force said, we need IT people in the room, you know. And so what we did is a consultation was arranged. So this is encouraging that the meeting has taken place and there's some hopeful ideas. So again, I think it would begin to unfold over some time. But to really, I think what I heard a lot of you say last time was leveraging. You know, there's a lot out there, and so this idea is terrific in that way that rather than create a brand new one, you know, it's sort of how do you link some of them together.
Yeah, another thing that we need is someone with knowledge about systems design and engineering, because I'm seeing that it's a lot of steps and processes, but they need to be fleshed out in a way that they are efficient. So we can have 5 pages and a checklist, and people have no time to check every box. So it's what I'm talking about, the system. How you arrange all those fields so quickly you can move through making sure that you're moving through a process and you're moving the case to a next level where you need to be doing other activities. So along the lines of getting someone in IT is getting someone that knows how to engineer processes.
Yeah, you know, we had heard that some of the patrol people don't have, you know, they weren't allowed to use the internet in their car even. I mean, but there's just a number of, you know, kinds of issues to work through. So
That's
kind
for
of
the
thinking,
consortium, I think.
yeah. What's that?
The consortium, when
Yes.
people come together, at that level is, I think, we
There's
need to
just
be
so
looking at
much
that.
detail.
Right.
But I do think we have enough, you know, I'm really inspired by the work that's been done to say that we've explored this, that there's some potential, you know, next steps to take. And I think that does give us some credibility for having an ongoing process, that this is hopeful. So there's sort of some momentum here that I'm feeling that we need to continue to run with some of these areas.
Just to add, our IT has committed to putting this proposal together
Okay.
in the next couple of days, so we should definitely be able to share that with the group at the next meeting. Just want to share.
That's great. Deborah?
You know, many times when work groups go on and continue, they lose some of the feeling of immediacy. And I would just say, I don't disagree with the work group continuing, because I don't think we can do all of our work by December. On the other hand, if it does continue, it would be nice to see year 1, year 2, year 3 goals built into the continuation, because we need that immediacy in order to make something happen. Otherwise, we just talk to ourselves.
Yeah, I initially thought, you know, is this just a 12-month thing that we say we want a 12-month? And then I thought, oh, some of these things, everything will just kind of drop if there's not this kind of integration going on. So I like that, you know, kind of thinking about, because I think at year 1 you could reevaluate too. You know, has this been effective? You know, this makes sense. Everybody's time is so tight. And but I think giving this at least another year to begin to implement a lot of the good things and ideas that have been, you know, brought here, and see it through and kind of keep the mojo going, keep some pressure, I guess. Yeah. So having a year, end of the year report
With goals.
Yeah.
Just a question to clarify. So I understand, you know, sort of the ongoing discussion to continue the work that's being done here. Is that different, or is that the same body that was asked about in terms of sort of more like a case coordination, like when there's an actual missing person case, an agency who's sort of the lead for communication in terms of helping to coordinate
That's,
you know,
I'm glad it comes
activities
back to, yeah.
there. Are we talking about the same body or is this a different?
I'm not sure. I'm not
So
sure.
it's a
I'm
good
open to
question.
discussion. Yeah, I think it's a question.
Okay.
Because I think that, Cecilia brought up that she'd like to see that
Right.
be part of it. So, I don't know, is it something we want to recommend and pilot that, or is it something that we build to and then we, launch it at a certain time?
Again, we need to define what is the role and the responsibility, and based on that, you'll be able to know who you need at the table. I'm sure
But I
that
mean,
you
the
keep them.
Yeah, the two roles, I mean, I guess it's like, do we want to take on that ombudsman kind of role,
Well, it's the
focus on that?
implementation of the group, right, and there's a potential for a steering committee, so that's the question. Would somebody want a steering committee overseeing the long-term goals and the long-term vision, and there's an agency in charge of the implementation issue outlined here? So that, I do like the second question.
It's a developing question. Okay. So, I'm sorry, give me the nuance of the whole part of that again.
I think what we're talking about here is there's the implementation part, right, which you outlined here. You can have a lead agency and a coordinating council that puts this together. But then, to Deborah's point, having a long-term goal, things like that, there's a steering committee. Maybe this is the group that's the steering committee or something like that, that would inform the group of this is what we'd like you to do over the next 3 years or something like that. Now, a lot of places don't want a steering committee, right? So I think it's an open question about whether or not we would have that.
And I see it working either way, right? I mean, you may have an agency that can play both roles. And I think that's what, we're going to be exploring that, but also looking to you for some answers on what you guys recommend with that. We have had internal discussions as to who could take on this centralized role. So we are, it's definitely been something that is being taken under consideration. We've talked about CEO, we've talked about OEM, WDAX, maybe DCFS. So it's an ongoing discussion for sure, but it's something that is going to be a key part of this project is to identify that specific agency or department.
Yes.
So I have just noticed in my years of doing this kind of work that when groups continue for years, that they delegate down from like department head to someone under the department head to general line staff, and then you don't have a powerful group. And so I think if we look at any kind of continuation, I think we have to specify what we want to happen, and maybe it has to be supervisor driven in order to bring the right people to the table of any steering committee. But I think there are a lot of committees here in the county on a lot of different issues.
Yeah.
And some are more effective than others.
Yes.
And this is one of those things where I don't know ins and outs, or obviously discussions can continue, but if it needs to be a official commission, that's a possibility. I mean, nothing is off the table at this point. It's those things where those are, by definition, year over year, decade over decade type positions that are different in numbers and makeup. They obviously rotate the supervisors, and as time passes, some come, some go. And that might be kind of what you're alluding to, where the power of the group is in and of themselves, they can't do anything. But everything they say ends up going to the supervisors, and it's a pretty close direct access. That could absolutely be something, if that seems to be valid or valuable, we'll discuss, certainly.
We have commissioners here. I mean, does it seem like a commission kind of an issue?
I mean, we started this issue 2 years ago, and which is why I'm at this table, and which is why we've had sheriff's department training over the last year. We have something like 300 sheriff deputies, and now CHPs being trained on how to interact with people who have intellectual disabilities. And so our commission has been that body. We can continue to be that body, but it would just be a periodic check-in of collecting the data, seeing if there's any kind of collaboration redux, but there still needs to be an entity within the county or the states, some very paid, powerful their daily job is that they are overseeing the communication and the facilitation of all of this. The commission cannot do that. The commission can do periodic check-ins and recommendations.
Have you worked with applicant on that knowledge yourself?
So maybe what we need is both. And I'm not sure which commission you're on.
County and local governmental services. So we're supposed to look at governmental services that we offer, and we have to provide an efficient way to deliver them, which this falls under, because it falls under cost-effective, time-effective, life-effective.
Yeah.
I can see the tiers, though, both being needed. One for political will, and one to make things actually happen, operationalize it.
So we already have a committee, so we already have a commission in place essentially that's doing this. That's where she's been running this show. She stopped me back in February, said, hey, we're already doing this pause. And so we put a pause in the motion before we went to the board and officially got approved, and we started this task force. And so we can start a whole new one, but it may be completely duplicative in nature or bureaucratic nonetheless, and certainly could roll back under you guys. But as you hear from the mouth itself, is that if you can't do this, or currently what has been happening isn't working, maybe you can speak to, well, what would it look like as a commission to be better? Is it meeting more regularly? Is it opening up the body to more people? Is it educating the public and having more of them come and voice concerns? If you highlight this issue itself over a few months, I mean, what could possibly help from a commission level in your mind so that we can kind of talk about that if it's even more that's going forward? Can you speak to that at all? Or?
I mean, I think that the
Okay.
evolution has been exactly as it should. I think that we invited in first responders on the county level and city of LA level, and we gathered similar information as a task force did, but in order to get a buy-in to provide the budget, to provide the facilitation of all of it, that's where we had not yet crossed that barrier when you and I came into contact. And so I think that's what this task force is doing, is really trying to identify among multi-agencies and multi-departments, how do we facilitate that, which I think is incredibly helpful. So once we finalize and we identify some action items that we are going to begin, let's say January 2018, as the commission, we will be able to probably, like I said, basically just gather data, check in with the supervisors quarterly and say, this is what we find is helpful, and this is not. My commission only meets once a month. I have 2 mayors, 4 councilmen, 2 lawyers, 2 city managers. They can't meet more than that. They won't meet more than that. So I'm just telling you the reality of my commission.
Right. No.
Maybe this is the time to talk about Cynthia's idea about the forensic center concept, where
Yeah.
I think the idea more is to, in addition to having that the commission type of entity, having basically an ad hoc task force that meets, on an ad hoc basis whenever there's an actual incident of wandering. All these agencies come together. Could be a conference call. Could be a conference call.
We get a
Is it
call a
really
day.
daily though?
That-
Let's-
yes,
we
it
get a
is
lot.
daily.
No, we're talking about an actual, where a person actually goes missing.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that's daily.
Yeah.
Daily,
It's
all the
daily.
time
Yes.
sometimes within the regional center.
Okay, well, even if it, okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Okay, so then,
No.
yes, well, that kind of answers our question about the
Yeah.
permanence, right?
Right. And I'm only just representing the regional center, but I do get the alerts from the other regional centers, and it's almost daily that we get 1 or 2 notices that somebody's not within the county.
Well, so I think the idea is still worth looking at, though, because let's say that person isn't found, because I believe a large percentage of those that go missing are found very quickly, right? But when it goes beyond that, a couple of days, I think that's when it's maybe ideal to have these the key teams, key areas come together to discuss what have we done so far?
Right. But
And
you're
what's
right,
our next steps?
They would have to be, given the fact that they have been missing 48 hours or more, that they might meet, rather
Right.
than saying every time that they go missing, because that
Right,
would be more.
it's
than
more
they
like
would
a
need to.
task force type of, forensic center type. It's not gonna be everybody on this task force, that's for sure. It's gonna be a like ad hoc type of situation.
Right, I think that the forensic center approach wouldn't be to do the daily activities, as you are saying, this happens every day. And I agree, I understand the need for a centralized agency who do
Yeah.
technical work, facilitation and coordination kind of thing. But
Picking up on trends and things, right?
right, but that group, whether we call it a forensic type of group or consortium, may be meeting on regular basis to review how effective the system has been, what's missing, and how can we leverage authorities and jurisdictions of agencies. And the key agencies will be represented there. So at the implementation stage, a core group of consortium or forensic
So I
Like a quality review.
could be there.
Oh, quality review.
Yes.
And, I want to add, whoever this body is going to be, they need to have adequate resources, not to put down my commission, but we have 3 staff who are shared among 10 county commissions. I don't know how other county commissions are, how much more, we just simply don't have the resources to provide the level of input that we're going to need. And so I feel like establishing a department, someone who's accountable for their work and has to report back to the supervisor, or that's a more efficient way to do it. We're happy again to look at it periodically, but that's just not the efficient way to do it. We really are just kind of a policy recommending body, not a facilitating body.
I can see why the forensic center has come up as an idea, in the sense that people that are on the front lines doing the work come together, and frequent enough that they begin to build trusting relationships, which then when you're caught in a, whoa, this isn't going well, you can pick up the phone and you call people and say, anything I'm missing, anything you can help me with, and you're coming from different disciplines, and you actually do the work on a regular basis. So I'm kind of piggybacking what you're saying. I agree. I think people that are where this is their daily work.
Yeah.
They're not administrators. They're the people that do it. But I don't know what that would look like.
Would this central coordinating agency have to be a 24/7 operation? Is that something that we want to look at? Would that be a requirement, do you think?
Well, there has to be at least one person who's, just as CHP, LAPD, sheriff is 24-hour, there needs to be at least a skeleton crew that is 24-hour, because people don't go missing from 9 to 5.
Exactly.
I guess I don't know. We have to think about their roles, because if their role is to actually do the work, they need to be around all the time. But if they're more consulting or, making sure
If
of
they're
practices.
connecting the first responders to each other, then it can be a skeleton crew. Again, we're not trying to impede on the investigation of the primary agencies. We're just trying to accentuate to expand the communication. So,
Again, it sounds like we're talking 2 tiers. We have the people who are operational and are coordinating and making sure the coordination is happening. And then there are people at a more policy level who are taking a look at, is it working well? And it may be advising the supervisors if it is not, or the department, as if it is not working well. I just think that we're not talking the same, we're talking 2 levels.
yeah, there's administrators and there's basically operators, like
That's
phone
what
operators,
That's another way to
right?
look at it.
Yes.
I'm looking more policy and then operational. Then the administrators and the operators are at the same administrative to operational level rather than.
Right.
Whereas, this group here is giving advice. And I think that's a different level than the people who are actually doing the coordination. So I definitely want the coordination. That's something you brought up earlier, and I think that's really important. And then if this continues, it has to be at a sufficient level to have an impact.
Yeah, I'm new to the group. I'm from the Department of Mental Health, but I've been involved in the forensics center and in the forensics model. And I think it is very important because what you're doing is you can bring cases and you have people who are doing the work and they see what's working. So you can take a problem case that was resolved well, what did we do that worked really well in that case? So I think that model would be very important to this, as far as people who are dedicated to this topic, finding people, and really looking at what really works well.
And then we'll move on to finish up next steps.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but I'm going to do it anyway. We have a walk, October 29th, and if you want to support the work we're doing, come to the walk. And I'm going to leave brochures out so that people can take them back to wherever you work. I'm going to put it by the water.
I heard Kirk talking about his team, actually, before we started the meeting, so very apropos. Any other comments from public members? I think we've been pretty open forum here. People felt comfortable, but I just wanted to be sure you knew you had time. Okay.
I'm curious as to what the Jane Doe Hospital policy item is.
Yeah, that's my next step. I feel like we really need some more momentum on the team. I've had some initial conversations. Dr. Cohen and I have met with Joanne?
Yeah, Joanne from DHS.
Yes, DHS, and we've been sort of talking, and I've talked with Kirk Moody about, he's done some fascinating work, kind of igniting the Hospital Association of Southern California to look at their policies across 172 private hospitals for the emergency departments. So there's sort of, we don't know exactly what that's looking like these days, but that was started at least about a month ago, I think, right? Close to a month now, where they put out the word that they're going to be doing this initiative. So I was talking to Kirk about, wanting to be sure that our county hospitals also do something similar. They might be included in that list.
They are, they're part of that.
So,
They're part of that, absolutely.
so maybe we can put a spotlight on those 6, you're telling me, for our work here to kind of carry that through. Because I don't know how successful they're going to be, like, when we put the word out to different entities to get input. But the goal would be to have, similar to this checklist, would be to start to look at what are the policies that happen in emergency departments, is there enhancements we can add? So kind of coming up with a best practice that then could be handed back to entities to either do training to adopt, to tweak, to fit their own operations. Is that how you understand it? So I'm afraid that momentum they have, I don't know what's going to keep pushing them, and so I would think that if we can help be that energy and wrap it into what we tell the board, that might help them move it along. I would say that. I'm not very diplomatic anyway. But I think, just giving some sense that we can bring this to another level and put some more attention to it. And I think it would be great if we can get the county partners just to step up and be leaders in this one. So thank you for that. So I don't know.
I just wanted to add that when Adria and I talked, some years ago when I got a call, we had a missing person and they were missing for some time. And we felt like we had exhausted all of our avenues. We talked to the sheriff's department, we had a liaison with us. And after a while, we found out that this person actually had been at Augusta Hawkins facility for a week and was being treated, but they didn't know who she was. They didn't know to ask for the regional center because she was some distance from us, and I don't know if it's because this person was picked up and then transported to different places, but ended, 50 miles away from us. And so we fortunately eventually did find and made that connection. But it took a long time, and there was no real reason, just that no one at the hospital ever thought that this individual might have association with the regional center, and so that, and that's why I'm glad you brought this up, is because that's, I'm sure, not only happened once.
Yeah, regional center clients, I mean, those that are served, I know they know minors, right? They kind of get that it's a different thing when you have a minor. So there's sort of these categories of types of patients that, yeah, we would want to help clue people into. And they all fit this definition of at-risk missing persons. Rich and I've talked a little bit about this. Oh, Solomon, go
Just a
ahead.
question to the regional centers. Is there any database system where you keep client information, something that can be shared and be utilized for this purpose?
Yes, and we have a system, whether or not we can share it, this is something we have to look into, because as you know, we have a lot of state regulations as well as HIPAA about the confidentiality, and we would probably, I mean, I have to go back and find out under what circumstances we might be able to share information without a person's consent. But otherwise, you know, to be proactive, we would probably have to have some consent form on file, and usually we have to renew those every 2 years. And you know, you can't just put something on that lasts forever, saying that it's okay in the event that I go missing, that my information is shared. So.
But you meet yearly with your clients, so that
Yes.
can be taken care of yearly anyways.
Yes, yes. But I'm just saying is that at this point, unless we had something like that, right now, most consent forms to share, we have to specifically say, I will share with, you know, this entity or that entity for the
Right.
purpose of implementing the individual program plan.
And that's understandable, I think. What may be important is to get information about the type of client information you have, how large it is, and if necessary, without you having to share the actual information, maybe a designated staff could immediately go into your own database and assist the search process.
Yes, that definitely is a
But
possibility.
to do that, is there any way we can also know about the structure, is that somewhat similar to the EMS system? You know, you got some information. We were aware about the level of information they are storing there, the structure. And so can you share that level of information, which is not confidential at all?
Sure, but I don't know if it would be appropriate to do so right this minute.
Yeah, I don't mean,
Yeah, no, but absolutely, because, you know, and it's, unfortunately, it's unique to us. It's not something, it's based on San Diego Information System, which is called SANDIS, and also the state developmental, the state has what's called a client master file. So we can talk about how that could be. But yes, we do, and then again, of course, the regional center is not a crisis intervention service. We do have an on-call system through that all of us are required to have, and as technology has changed, we're getting more and more access to our database remotely so that we can answer questions. And we can, if you were, for instance, contact our regional center, we do have access to a statewide database if we knew a person's name and say, yes, that person is associated with South Central Los Angeles Regional Center.
Right.
We wouldn't know all the details about that person, but we would know if we had a name, for example. So yes, we definitely have a database that can be utilized in a positive way.
What I got excited about when you and I talked was that you have electronic photos on most of your consumers.
Yeah, we started recently, last year, we gave our service coordinators iPads that gave us the opportunity to take a photo of each of our clients when they are having their annual review, so that that photo is current and is available, because otherwise our photos that we had on file were taken at the time of intake. So they may have come in as a 3-year-old and now they're 36, so that's not going to help you a whole lot. You know, so we were trying to make sure that we were annually taking photos and keeping that current for the purposes of identifying the individual.
I think that's a big thing. One of the things we've been learning from our meetings with law enforcement is without a photo recognition or a fingerprint, it may be difficult to assist people who wander away and get lost, because part of the problem is they cannot communicate, they may not be able. It's difficult to identify who these people are.
Yeah.
So the easy way would be if there's any fingerprint information or a photo recognition. That's pretty.
Yeah, we don't actually have fingerprints, but I was excited to see what you were passing around as something that I know some of our families might like to very much have something like that. And I remember just when my son was very small, that there was a whole push within the daycare system to make sure that there were fingerprints on files for minors, that were very small, to make sure that they could be recovered if they were abducted.
This comes out of that movement actually for kids, yeah.
Yeah.
So there is also a registry at UCLA. I mean, it's not huge, but I think it's got about 1,400 people in it with dementia. And under School of Geriatrics, David Rubin has a registry.
That you go to proactively?
I think they've never used it that way, but I would bet they'd be interested to hear about other ways to use their registry. It mostly affects the west side
Yeah.
and the San Fernando Valley.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. So every meeting, yeah, there's new stuff. So fantastic. So we have basically 2 more meetings. We're going to be meeting on the 25th of October with a real focus on showing us what we can do in the healthcare systems and taking that out to long-term care as well. We have had Molly Davies, the ombudsman for our county, come to these meetings, and I'm not sure what this looks like, but we need to figure out ways to be working on all the facilities out there, and we've talked about, ways to communicate across licensed facilities at least in an easy way. So I think there's a lot of, again, low-hanging fruit about sort of, directories and communication, email groups that could be, part of this as well. The whole emergency department has been a big focus. We, really wanted to see if we can get some sort of best practices in our recommendations as well. So I sort of see, the hub of emergency and then the long-term care, seeing what we can do to put a spotlight on those, look at any quick fixes, and then the ongoing work that needs to be looked at in those areas.
And I just want to make a suggestion. I was thinking about those people who couldn't afford the mechanism that we were talking about promoting. And many people in our county have Medi-Cal and Medicare. And there might be a way to bring someone from the State Department of Healthcare Services to the meeting who could talk to health plans about what they call care plan options and using care plan options to pay for this kind of thing for their members. J.C. Cooper is someone you might want to consider.
Okay. We can talk more about that. Thanks.
Happy to.
Okay. Any other folks that would be interested in sort of helping us with the healthcare area? Or people we should invite? Kirk saying yes, me. But maybe we can get the Southern California Hospital Association. Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we not talk about that, see if we can have you back as well.
Okay, great. Talk about that. The whole HSA movement to have the first integrate your whole area, is that something that you're thinking about? Does that fit in here at all or no?
I think we can, definitely.
Okay. So it might be sort of a part of the community that's educated, or would they have electronic medical record?
Well, I think one of the things probably worth, and this is where Joanne Hyde should be brought into the conversation, would be exactly that. What are some of the protocols that actually could be put in place in the clinics, in the EDs?
Okay, perfect.
This is just a bit tangential, but I'm a part of the emergency planning efforts in LA County and been part of planning for the mass care and shelter annex to the plan for the county. And one of the subgroups has been what they've been calling repatriation and resettlement. But for me, I was more concerned about when people are brought to a shelter and making sure that they are reconnected with their families or their caregivers. And so if we develop a system here that works for the periodic situations when people go missing from their families or from their caregivers, that system will help immensely Because once we have, let's say, a catastrophic earthquake here and shelters are set up in the various places, people are going to be potentially away from their caregivers, or caregivers, may or may not be available because of their own injuries or their families, and they may end up in shelters and people won't know who they are. So I'm very concerned about being able to get people reconnected. So I'm just thinking that what you all are setting a foundation for is going to be very instrumental in the success of reconnecting people after a catastrophic event.
When, if anybody's reading the paper, right, we've been watching, those that we deem as at risk, not getting reunified, or how that's not going well.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is a whole area, and I thought about the group that you're on, and how do we integrate, how do we work together? So keep the dialogue going. I think I'd like to sort of formally close the meeting, because I know a lot of you want to touch base, and some of you need to get going. So we'll go ahead and just formally close. I want you to know we'll continue to be working on the sort of the health piece before the next meeting, so that we can have some things to really hear and talk about. And we'll get this into the format of the report, so you can start to see how it's starting to build. The final process, we're thinking November, would be ideal to have something ready that those that are named in the motion would actually need to sign off on that report. Of course, it's going to indicate how all of us were a part of creating it, and so we'll have all the agencies that were involved. But those, if you've been named by the supervisor, then we'd like you to kind of, give us a big nod with your signature. So let me know, offline if you feel uncomfortable with that, or you want to see things beforehand, or how to make sure that you're feeling you're coming along with the recommendations. All right, we're formally adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.